Hello everyone, and welcome back to the RimWorld Rags to Riches series. My friends, I am glad to see you back here as per the usual, but I am afraid I have some bad news and a little bit of good news. This episode is going to be our last episode in the Rags to Riches series, but don't freak out, don't start rioting in the streets, as we are going to be continuing our work on our space station hotel, going to the moon with a possible casino, all this and more, just maybe in a second season or something of that sort. The main goal of the series, of course, was to create a gigantic city that took up the entire map and to make a shit ton of money, which we have definitely done, and we have achieved all of those goals, or at least we will by the end of this episode for sure. But as we continued this series, we've had more and more goals with a casino on the moon and everything we've already discussed, and thus why I've decided to split them into different seasons. But with that news out of the way, it is time for us to actually begin in today's episode, and right now we have Jor working hard and tediously at making some concrete. And funny enough, after we've upgraded our city so much, we have yet to actually upgrade a lot of our industrial district, so that's what we're going to begin doing today. One of the first things that we're going to be adding to our industrial district is actually going to be a proper concrete factory. Now, up until this point, I've been storing all of our stone chunks, which is the exact same thing that we use to make concrete, on the outsides of the fencing of our city limits, and we'll no longer really have to do that, as we'll be keeping it in here and we won't have to walk so far to make concrete. I also added in plenty of storage for concrete itself and 2 mixers compared to our 1 mixer that we have been working with for so long. I also ended up putting this just above our crematorium, or whatever we're calling it, where we burn bodies, because I figured the smell of mixing concrete and also burning corpses would probably be best in the same area. Or, you know, just at the very least away from our residential areas and businesses. Piggybacking off of that though, we still have a lot of old homes where we used to live when we first founded this city that are in dire need of some upgrades as well to their beauty and their quality. Now, a lot of these are currently vacant, as they were the homes of our police force, but of course last episode we ended up building our police officers some more proper and much better looking homes. But I couldn't bring myself to bulldoze them and build something over top of them, because truly they are a big piece of the city's history and some of our oldest structures on the entire map, of course. And the same for our employee apartment complex here that we used to use as our restaurant in the original first few episodes. I'm just feeling a bit of nostalgia, I suppose. Anyhow, we put in some nice beautiful stone flooring for them and just a few other little upgrades like that. But even with as small and narrow as the apartment complex was, I wanted to go ahead and add in some nice recreational items and a sofa, so we put in a small tube television as well as a chess table. Truly the least that we could do for our loyal employees. They don't get a 401k, but they do get a TV, so better than nothing, but they do have to share. I also ended up putting in some nice roads and pathing off screen here throughout this little residential area. Once again, I just couldn't bring myself to bulldoze it, so I wanted to pretty it up a little bit, and as we continue getting more employees, some of them can come here and live. It just kind of reminds me of, you know, you could be in some city somewhere, maybe your hometown, and then you see a strange little cabin somewhere, and it's kinda just out of place, but it's because it is someone's home place or something, an original structure of the city. Now then, for the time being, we're going to be done with our industrial section of the city, and we're going to begin focusing more on the residential and the business side, and up in the northeastern corner of the city, and just right next to our museum essentially, we're actually going to be building a brand new rentable area where folks with very little coin can come in and get some decent amenities and some decent hospitality without having to travel south to our homeless shelter instead. This, my friends, is our very first hostel, if you don't count the little hotel that we actually built in the southern part of the city as well. This is essentially just a very cheap place that people can rent out for a night or two, where we are going to have large masses and groups of people staying, for a very, very low cost, of course. Now, personally, I had brought this up in the past, but I will give the credit to our friend Victor DeMay, who suggested the exact same idea based on my brief comment, so thank you ever so much. Even though the hostel itself is priced for some folks that are a little bit less fortunate, we could say, than our average luxurious previous guest, I wanted them to also have some pretty nice things. It seems like the city would keep up this area fairly well to keep crime low and to keep spirits high, so we also built a very small little park and or flower garden here for people to go out and enjoy. Since we have so many new buildings in this area, like our museum and especially our place of worship, our gigantic temple, I thought that it would also probably be a good idea to go ahead and build a parking lot up here, as we're sure to have plenty of people driving. Also, since last episode, we ended up designating this small area here for our police housing, and it is a city-owned piece of property, even though everything is. I also wanted to turn this small area here into a supply depot where they basically would store a lot of their building materials. And with that, my friends, a second piece to our four-corner puzzle of the city comes together. This marks the second time that we've completely filled out yet another section of the city and or corner of the city, and that is something to be proud of indeed. A little bit of time later, we finally finished up our extensive research into advanced types of batteries, which took a little bit longer than we would have expected, mostly because I had Jor and all of his genius assigned to making concrete for all of our new projects this episode. Now with that research finally finished, we could begin implementing this new technology into our power plants. Now eventually I'd like to try to completely phase out the old batteries, but for now we're just going to add in the additional advanced batteries until we have enough resources to completely replace all the old ones. But this also really got me thinking. We do have enough power production for now to keep the city going, but we've been struggling this entire series as we continue expanding the city larger and larger, and since we are finally going to be finishing the city off in this episode, I want to also finally finish off our power grid and our power generation. And that's why not only am I adding in some advanced wind turbines out here, but I am also going to be adding in an entirely brand new gigantic solar panel field and or generator area here, as you can see, that is essentially going to be nothing but a gigantic concrete square with a shit ton of solar generators. Now unfortunately this did take an unbelievably long amount of time, though you guys don't actually have to deal with that. As you can see, it is now completed, but I wanted to bring this up because honestly it is yet another reason as to why I feel that this is probably a good time to split the series, because with as big as our city has gotten and all of the people that we have renting off of us and visiting from us, things are getting incredibly slow. But as we were working on our new giant power plant, we ended up receiving a signal aboard our space station. There was an incoming vessel requesting an emergency docking from the Marshal Service, so of course we accepted. As you can see, they had a bit of a hot landing to say the least, but everything seems to be intact. For the most part, that is. Out came 3 Martianauts who thankfully didn't seem to be injured by their crash docking, and neither did our station for the most part. Upon further inspection, these 3 Martianauts appeared to be the same that actually landed on the moon some time ago, with them being Roman, Cutie, and Slate. Slate, of course, once again, being the daughter of the infamous General Hawthorne. Needless to say, as a former Martianaut himself, Motzi was very intrigued to converse with them, you could say. And it looks like they're going to have plenty of time to do so, because our radio terminal to communicate with Mission Control and basically anyone not on this station right now is damaged. Not that they could go anywhere anyhow, as they had damaged our lander and of course their own during their crash docking, so we decided to help them out and begin repairing it a bit. In the meantime, while we're doing that, up in orbit around the planet of Degum, back on the ground, we actually began working on some brand new luxury rooms for our casino property. Now, up until this point, we've only had 4 of these luxury rooms to rent out, which is no bueno, as last episode, as you could see, we had the President of the Republic's daughter and mother join us at the station. What if they would have came here with an entire fancy entourage and we didn't have enough expensive rooms to charge them for? So we took a few days to complete these, and during this time, we also ended up finishing our repairs on the radio terminal on the station, where Motzi and Slate were having some interesting conversations, you could say. Slate was talking about how the Marshals plan on starting something of a space mining empire. Perhaps a potential series in the future? But Motzi also told her about a rumor he heard from Neenel, our mayor of course, about how her father's brains were scrambled by the S&R rifle company long time ago. Needless to say, this was some pretty intense news to Slate, who thought her father was already dead by this point. Perhaps this will help her in the future. Either way though, their lander had been completely repaired after we contacted the Marshal Service for their blueprints, of course, on how to go about fixing it, and with that, our guests were off. Such a shame, given the circumstances, we decided not to even bother charging them for a bed while they were here, but no good deed goes unpunished, so hopefully we'll make some money back in another way. Speak of the devil, we're sending out the old Big Smoke, our big rig semi-truck, to do a bit of trading with some of the local towns under the Republic of Libertas. Just in case you need a quick refresher, we're selling off many of our things like our many different types of alcohol, i.e. vodka and gin, as that's about all the variety we have. Soda, we're even selling off some leathers and other things like that, though our trading is going to take a while as we are going to many different settlements. Now you may be asking though, Rat Daddy, I thought that Neenel had set up a specific trade deal with Dibbo to go about actually setting up trade routes specifically with the United Traders Union in a few episodes ago. Well, my friend, you are indeed correct, but we haven't completely forgotten about them, as we had actually requested one of their bulk goods traders come to our city. This way we're prioritizing trade with the Traders Union, but we're also making some moolah off everyone else as well. We sold alcohol, soda, and leathers to our rebel companions, and we would end up selling plenty of construction materials like concrete and wood to the United Traders. By the time it was all said and done, we had made a measly 2,790 pieces of silver, which wasn't too shabby for a singular trade. By this point, we had also finally finished up our new luxury rooms to rent out, and I believe we're going to continue making at least another 4 or so of these in the area. By that point, I think we'll have plenty enough rooms to facilitate and to accommodate as many of our luxurious fancy pants guests and their comrades as possible. In the meantime, back on the old trade route, the Big Smoke was on its way back when we spotted a large blockade ahead. Uh-oh. Looks like we have about 3 or so Outlander bandits completely blocking the road with tank traps. I think things are about to get a little bit dicey. With little time to think, Lewis would make a sharp turn around the tank traps, completely avoiding them, but opening up the Big Smoke to a barrage of bullets. This caused us to begin taking some major damage to our right chem tank on the truck, and we were leaking chem fuel everywhere. A few more hits like that, and the truck is going to be dead in the water. Given the circumstances, our only option would be to fight, so Lewis and Roger jumped out of the truck and began firing upon these damn dirty bandits. They would also have to use the truck as cover though, which caused it to take more damage. The only option would be to rush this son of a bitch and try to cut him to pieces, which we would eventually do before we began engaging with his comrades. Lewis would attempt to throw flares at their leader in an attempt to maybe blind her, but she had some sunglasses on, so this didn't seem to work. Eventually though, after firing at them and they took a few bullets, they decided to try to run away, probably the best decision that they've ever made in their lives. Unlike most employees, Lewis here is loyal till the very end, and he would indeed die for the shareholders. Nevertheless though, we do need to repair the chem fuel tanks on our truck and refuel, so we began working on that for the next few hours before we finally would head back home. But I did notice that a particular weapon that was used by the bandits, the one with the gas mask in particular, appeared to be some type of tear gas canister launcher. Now that could come in handy. Upon our arrival back into the city, Lewis immediately pulled the Big Smoke up next to the bank and dropped off the gigantic haul of silver that we made. Similar to how we use our tractor to harvest crops and then take them to our restaurants and other storage areas, we would end up doing the same, of course, with silver with the Big Smoke, making it much easier to haul in. And just the same, we would also drop off our new tear gas canister launcher over at the prison for some of our prison guards, as it seemed like quite a fitting weapon here for Hooch. Perhaps if our little Oregon farm prisoners get a little bit too rowdy, old Hooch here could shoot them right between the eyes with a canister, together and then make them cry in other ways with the gas, is what I meant. But speaking of our jail guards, Worm and Hooch, last episode I did ask you guys for some more proper and fitting names, and of course just some names in general that would be suggested by you lovely folks, and we currently have the names of Good Cop and Bad Cop. These are very silly, funny, goofy, and whimsical little names, and I actually do really like them. I think that they're pretty good. These wonderful names come from our friend UC Reanimated, who not only talks about how, of course, it is a funny and whimsical name, of course, for both of them, as I mentioned, but also it does really make sense since they are going to be interrogating the prisoners within our jail cells pretty often as well, so I think it's quite fitting. Now, last episode, we also discussed a comment about our fallout shelters, but in particular that we should build a special, more luxurious fallout shelter for Nino himself, and I thought where better to put this than in his backyard, of course. I also want to mention that this is going to be a double-walled fallout shelter compared to our triple-walled one that we built last episode, but that is because the walls are going to be made out of armored rebar concrete, which has a maximum durability of 2,000 hit points, which I think is pretty close to being triple that of plasteel, so pretty damn durable, I'd say. On the internal portion of this little fallout shelter, we ended up giving Nino the basics. He of course has a shower, a toilet, stuff like that. I didn't go too fancy with that as I didn't really think it would matter since he's the only one in there, but he did end up having a nice royal bed, some royal furniture to go along with it, of course, and on the outside he also has a septic tank and a portable generator on the inside as well, similar to our one from last episode, just basically self-sustaining. And as previously mentioned, it is indeed in his backyard. Quite frankly, if I got it any closer, it would have been part of his house, so I think if a nuclear bomb were to drop in the area, this should be a pretty good distance for him to get there. I had considered building a really large one for all the residents of the city, but to be honest with you, I'm not really sure that we would put all our funding in that. It seems like we want to maximize profits more so, and to be honest, even if the city is destroyed and we still have our tenants, you know, it doesn't really matter. We won't be able to make any money on them. Now, as we continue filling out our city and using up the space properly, we did have this area here that is next to our little lake, our lodge, but also next to our new power plant, and so I didn't really want to put any residential housing or anything down here. So instead, I ended up making a very large park. Not exactly the same as the previous parks that we've been making, as this one is basically solely going to be focused on nature, which I guess is the point of a park, but what I mean is we're not going to have a lot of planted trees and bushes and flowers. We basically just made a very small little dock area where people can walk and look at the water and sit and enjoy just nature and the lake and yada yada yada. I'm pretty sure you get my point here. To be honest with you, I'm quite proud. This might be one of my favorite projects that I've actually made through the city. I really enjoy doing the parks, if you couldn't tell, of course, as I find them to be very beautiful and scenic. And I'm sure that our fine citizens and guests will enjoy it as well. I feel that this piece of property here would also be owned and maintained by the lodge as well. Now then, moving on up to the northwestern section, just by our space center, we were actually going to begin working on a new structure here, as well as a grandiose parking lot. This is going to serve as a parking lot for the space center, as well as all of its employees, which I think are going to be living in the apartments here just next to the parking lot, as that would make the most sense to me. We may also end up adding in some additional ones as well, but as you can see here, we are going to have a large storage building where we are going to be storing components, steel, plasteel, and items like that that are used for crafting spacecraft. Coming back around to what we were talking about a moment ago though, with building more apartment complexes, we are going to be building some just next to this parking lot above the other ones that we already have installed. That way they are going to be fully stocked and ready for any new employees to the Mission Control building, which is actually going to tie in and begin basically preparing us for the next season when we begin doing all this space travel and building these casinos and these hotels and everything in orbit around the planet, on the moons, yada yada yada, all that fun stuff, friendos. The hope as well is giving out this housing like this to any employees of Mission Control and our space center will help incentivize more employees coming and working there. In the meantime, we would also begin working on some more research for our cooking purposes, such as some soups. It's been a hot minute, but a few episodes back, I have mentioned how I wanted to start focusing on the cooking research more and more, as I'd like to create something of a gourmet restaurant. And that is exactly what we began to do. I ended up putting this right next to the luxury rooms that we're renting out just to the west of the casino in the further corner of the map underneath our space center. And the reason that I always want to bring up where these are located, in particular this one, is because I feel like a gourmet restaurant like this is definitely going to be catered to some of our guests with the deeper pockets, some of our high rollers, if you will. And as you can see with this restaurant, we would spare no expense with some very royal looking tables and very luxurious lugs and a fine slate floor. We would also have a very grand kitchen as well as a food storage area, which is just much better than something you would find in any of our other shops and restaurants around the city, of course. With such a fine atmosphere, it was time for us to begin making some fine and lavish food, starting off with a lavish potato soup. But this would simply be the beginning of what we end up serving here to our guests. In case for some reason you are curious as to why I'm even bothering with all these restaurants and everything since we are ending the season, I feel that it's important to mention that not only am I just doing this to try to fill out the rest of the city and to finish off the city, which is our main goal, but once we actually start the next season, where our main goal is to make all of these businesses in space, our primary funding is still going to be coming from restaurants just like this one. A large portion of our funding already comes from many of our tenants throughout the city who rent off of us, but a lot of our luxury guests who are also paying top dollar for some very high quality rooms, and it is my hope as well that this restaurant will improve their stay and the quality of their visit here, as well as attracting more guests such as these. And now, my friends, we come to something of a bittersweet moment. We have completely finished the city. As you can see, every single buildable corner of this map is completely filled to the absolute brim with our structures. And in my opinion, I think that it looks really beautiful. This is, quite frankly, probably the largest building project that I have ever undertaken in RimWorld, and definitely the largest that I've ever undertaken on the channel for sure. And even though our bank isn't completely filled to the brim, as I maybe had discussed previously, that may be something that we end up using as our absolute end goal for all of these seasons and the series of Rags to Riches in general. But as we look over our beautiful city and everything that we have built this series, I want to say thank you. I want to stress, and I want you guys to understand, that none of this would have been possible without you. If you've liked the video, if you've commented your suggestions, if you've even watched for a single minute or 30 seconds, I don't know, a very minimal amount of time, it is because of you that we were able to do this. So thank you all ever so much. As always, you guys are amazing. Genuinely, the amount of support that I get on these series for the RKRU, Rags to Riches, the Gun Empire, the communities that are built up around these series will never cease to amaze me. Truly, they are my favorite, and to see how much you guys really enjoy these series and these seasons and everything, these videos, it brings such a smile to my face and such warmth to my heart. I mean, genuinely, I know that's very sappy, but it does. And I love you guys, and I really, really appreciate all of you so much. There would be no me without you, and I always find it very important to stress that and to just show how grateful I am for you guys. And it is also because of you guys that this series is not ending here with the completion of the city. Rags to Riches shall return, my friends, and when it does, we shall be taking our corporate greed to yet another level. We shall be taking it to the stars, to the heavens. For we have only begun to scratch the surface of the possible monetization of the void of space, and by golly, I'm telling you, we are going to take it to its absolute limits. But that shall be in the future, my friends. I would once again like to thank you all ever so much for watching this episode, as well as the series thus far. As we have come from nothing, a homeless gentleman on the street who has built a powerhouse of a corporation. Until next time, friends.